when we were doing our GCSEs, we were being asked, what do you want to do when you leave school? And I just thought, well, a lawyer sounds like such an interesting job. You get paid loads of money at the end of it. It's a career where you can work hard, get promoted, and fundamentally you got there based on your academic. But I met a guy at a barbecue just once. I said, what do you do for work? And he says, oh, I'm a stockbroker. He's actually what he said to me. I'm a stockbroker. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. What does that do? Again, like my sort of like this alarm bell was going off in my head. I've heard of stockbroker before. I know they make loads of money.
They wear suits.
They wear suits, exactly. After a round of interviews, meeting some people, meeting the new people that were joining, they needed somebody to come in as a trainee investment manager. And that's fundamentally how I got my job. But it started with this one conversation at a barbecue and then just following up on it.
I spend a lot of time with you and I'm privy to your extraordinary superpower, which is to get into the deepest of conversation over the 2 minutes that it takes to order and pay for a coffee. And I think that is your superpower. How do you get into these conversations?
How do I get into these conversations? I'm genuinely interested in what people have to say.
You're curious.
I'm very curious.
What do you need to improve on? What next? Where do we go from here?
Hello and welcome back to the Ambitious Minds podcast. I'm your guest, Jay. And on this week's episode, we have Julia as the host.
Yeah, this is a nice little change, isn't it? Now you're in the red seat.
In the hot seat.
The hot seat.
Yeah, now time to hear my story by popular demand.
So do you want to tell people why I'm interviewing you?
Yeah, I thought that we would today make this episode about me. There have been a few questions from people and they've said, it feels like you have a story to tell as well. And I guess that sort of goes back to the reason why this podcast started in the first place. I wanted to find like-minded people who have interesting stories and are ambitious and they want to climb the ladder and sort of succeed in whatever they're doing. And I am also one of those people. I'm also trying to
be an ambitious mind.
Be an ambitious mind, fundamentally, yeah, as the name says. So, I just decided to start a podcast which hopefully brought together a lot of people and to share similar stories. But like I said, there have been, I will also have a story to tell. So I thought, let's turn the seat onto me. And episode 20 this will be. So, make it a nice round number as well.
Nice. So, most people know you as Ambitious Minds Podcast, Jay. Well, no, most of our listeners are our friends, so they actually know you. But most people know you as Ambitious Minds, Jay. Do you want to talk to us about what your day job is?
Yeah, so I'm a wealth manager, specializing in investments. And I've been doing that really for about...
And wait, sorry to interrupt, but for people that don't know what that means, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I guess fundamentally, I'm helping people look after their money and to try to grow their money and, make it as tax efficient as possible. People come to us with problems. They say, I've got some savings that I need a plan for it. So we help them with that plan. We put together a plan. We give them a long-term objective, and then fundamentally we use the market as a method to try to grow their money for them. And I think a lot of people are probably aware of stocks and shares, but don't really know how to go about actually investing into them. So some people choose to do it themselves. Some people choose to get a professional to do it, and that's where we step in, or I step in, as an investment manager.
So you offer a professional service to people that want to grow their wealth, in essence.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. And how did you get into that?
I guess the story goes back quite far. I'll go back to the start. I didn't know what I wanted to do I'll go back to the start. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a lawyer. And I didn't really know what investments were at that point. But when we were in school and doing our GCSEs, and I think some careers people came in and they said, what do you want to do when you leave school and go to university? And I said, well, I think that a lawyer sounds like quite a good job.
Why is that?
Why? I just think that because it sounded like a smart person did it. And I considered myself to be smart. I was in the top sets at school. And fundamentally, I've always wanted to get to the top and do an established job.
When you're a kid, there's only really lawyer, doctor,
that's
veterinarian.
And something, I guess, fundamentally to make my parents proud of me. I wanted to do something where I knew I wanted to wear a suit. I just knew that. I don't know why. But
Yeah, all you do now is not wear suits.
yeah, fundamentally, I hate wearing a suit now, which is quite an interesting full circle moment. But I knew I wanted to wear a suit because the image I had in my head is that successful people wore suits. And London, I grew up in Essex, and sort of London was, within touching distance. And I saw people's parents who went to London and they wore a suit, and I thought, they must be doing really well for themselves. And when we were doing our GCSEs, we were being asked, what do you want to do when you leave school? And I just thought, well, a lawyer sounds like such an interesting job. You get paid loads of money at the end of it. It's a career where you can work hard, get promoted, and fundamentally you got there based on your academics.
Merit.
And based on merit, yeah. Which is ironic because my first ever job was working in law. And when I was around lawyers and barristers in particular, and this was corporate law, so like corporate law is, I think, very unique in that it is you work a lot of hours, but the work is quite boring, but it pays you a lot of money. And I just looked at it at that age and I was like, I don't want to do this.
You started your career in law, and then you were no, this is not for me.
And I looked around, and I'm glad that I did that because I didn't actually go down the route of doing my any sort of like legal qualifications at this point. I went in and was doing essentially admin for these people. I was going to the library and I was photocopying textbooks, basically, like legislation, and I was taking them to and from court and all these sorts of things. But I was around them the whole time, and they were working until the early hours of the morning. They all lived nearby, and I just thought there must be more to life than this. And so that sort of like really scared me away from law. It wasn't something that I enjoyed. But I met a guy at a barbecue just once. And I was chatting to him, and I said, what do you do for work? And he says, oh, I'm a stockbroker. He's actually what he said to me. I'm a stockbroker. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. What does that do? Again, like my sort of like this alarm bell was going off in my head. I've heard of stockbroker before. I know they make loads of money.
They wear suits.
They wear suits, exactly. And he just said, the job that I do has a really good work-life balance. I've got my clients. I'm investing in the market. And he told me a bit about what he did. And I was like, that sounds fascinating. So I basically stalked him.
Okay.
I'm going to just be honest about it. I basically stalked this guy. He also lived in Essex, and he got the same train as me to work. So I knew roughly what time he went to work in the mornings, and I was going to work at a similar time. I saw him on the platform sometimes. So, sometimes I would deliberately position myself on the platform, roughly whereabouts he got on every morning. We're creatures of habit. We get on the same carriage and the same seats. So I started chatting to him. Only a few times, chatting, got the train to work with him a few times. I went off to do my legal job. He went off to do his wealth management job. And then one day when I was essentially I got to a point where I was in tears about how much I hated this job. And I remember sitting down with my boss at the time and we were chatting about it. And he was like, look, if it's not for you, I'll help you trying to get out. And we sort of cast the net quite wide. But I sort of anchored back to this guy who worked in wealth management, or stockbroker as he called it at the time. And I messaged him on LinkedIn, and I sent him a message and I said, hey, Will, I don't know if you remember me, but we had a conversation. I'm looking to get out of law and move across into what you do. Could you spare a coffee I want to understand how you got into what you did. And he messaged me back almost straight away, but it went into my junk. So I didn't see it for 2 weeks.
Oh no.
And I remember looking through my spam, just this guy, William Sawyer. I was like, fuck. I was like, I've missed this message. And he basically said, hey mate, really good to hear from you. Yeah, why don't you come into the office one day and I'll tell you about how I got there. So I responded being like, hey, yeah, I'm really sorry. I can't believe I've missed this. It went into my spam. To which he replied saying, I've just started at this new company and I'm glad that you told me about that because I'm wondering why my clients aren't responding to me. Right. But yeah, and he went in there and I met him for a coffee. We went into a meeting room and he basically printed out some things like, these are the exams that I did to do what I do. And that was the last time I saw him for a few years. But in the meantime, I took that piece of paper away with me. I applied for some entry-level finance roles, and in the background, I just did those qualifications. Like, I just felt like that's what I needed to do.
Whilst you were still working in law?
No, at this point, I applied for an administration platform for investment management. And
okay, so you had your foot in the door to try and dip your toe into what you thought the next.
I just started at the bottom.
But you were like, I'm done with law, I'm leaving it, and on the off chance that I will become a stockbroker or an investment manager, let me try whilst I do my qualifications.
Exactly, and literally I got a bonus. I think I got a bonus in like April, and I knew that would buy me a couple of months. So I quit without a job. I just left.
Scary.
It was scary, but I was living with my parents at the time, and I just felt like, what have I got to lose?
If not now, when?
And yeah, I guess like looking back, it probably was quite a scary, bold move to do.
I think a lot of people stay in careers they don't like because they're scared of making that step, or because they don't have a safety net of say, living at home. Everything is quite expensive when you live by yourself. So it is a big step if you think about it.
Yeah, I don't think I really thought about how big the step was at the time. Obviously, I can reflect back now and say, it was just like the best thing I ever did. And that would be my message to anybody, is like, if you are in a situation and you have the means to try something different, like if you don't enjoy your work and an opportunity comes around where you can quit, bonuses are fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you can save up and give yourself a bit of a buffer and just do it. Like,
give it a go.
And that would be my lesson, my message to somebody, because it's the best thing I ever did. I quit law without a job. I was living at home at the time, and I was just applying. I was tweaking my CV because I had no idea at this point, like, what these people were looking for. I was trying to make my experience as relevant as possible, because it wasn't relevant at all. Like, everything that I had on my CV at this point was, I've worked in law, and I've never done anything finance related. So, but somebody gave me an opportunity, and again, I think it was quite lucky that I got a phone call back to one of my applications, and actually I'm gonna go back a step, because I got 2 interviews at the same time, and I was essentially competing for 2 jobs. And one of them was, I tailored a personal letter so specifically to this company, because I was on Twitter at the time, and I'd seen this guy, and he was the chief investment officer at a company, and I remember that I wrote a covering letter basically saying how much I sort of like looked up to this guy, and I'd been reading his commentary, and he was essentially giving me the foundations and my education to learning about investments, which I had no idea about at this point. And they interviewed me. Basically, I think based on the CV, I had no relevant experience. Also, based on the cover letter, I had no relevant experience on my CV, but I tailored my cover letter literally to this particular company. And I got an interview. And I also got an interview at this other company, which is now where I've met quite a lot of the people that have been on the podcast. If you've heard about me talking about, I worked with you in the past and they've all gone off in different directions, this is the place where I ended up.
What a breeding ground for ambitious minds.
It was a breeding ground for people who either stayed there and are still there now and are not ambitious minds. Sorry to anyone listening. Or they were ambitious and they were just getting their foot in the door to finance, and then maybe they realised it wasn't for them and they went off in different directions. And Tom, Liam, a really great guy called Jimmy as well that I met there, he's gone off to do some amazing things, and I think he'll be a guest on the podcast at some point in the future, just not yet. He's busy. But yeah, I've met some people there, and they equally had ambition, but it was like it was a breeding ground for young people who were moving to London, and that's where I started off. But in the meantime, to go back to the story, I did these qualifications that this guy told me to do, and then after about a year, maybe about 18 months or 2 years at this entry-level finance role, I started then applying for the next step. I had some exams under my belt, and I got a job offer. I got an interview at a company called Investec, which coincidentally was where that guy worked. So,
But not with him.
but not with him. No, different team. So again, I reached out to him on LinkedIn and I said, hey, Will, I haven't spoken to you for 2 years, but I've got an interview at Investec. It's working on this team. Can I get any advice to prepare myself? And he just messaged back saying like, hey, Jay, are you free for a call? Jumped onto a call. He's like, so sorry, like, what have you done since I last spoke to you? And I said, well, I've done all those qualifications that you told me to do. And he just like laughed and he went, so you've done those qualifications that I told you to do? I was like, well, obviously, like you said I needed to do that. So I just went away and did it. And here I am now with those qualifications in the last couple of years and some relevant finance experience. And it's got me a job at the company you work for.
It's got me an interview.
Sorry, it's got me an interview at the company you work for. And he was just like, oh shit. Okay, well, funnily enough, we have some people joining my team in maybe like 6 months or a year's time. Are you patient? I think you'd be a really good fit for them. And fundamentally, fast forward, I think 6 months, 8 months, after a round of interviews, meeting some people, meeting the new people that were joining, they needed somebody to come in as a trainee investment manager to help them to bring across their clients from another company. And that's fundamentally how I got my job. But it started with this one conversation at a barbecue, and then just following up on it
Sort of. I think that's an interesting point. I certainly have had a similar story. I think a lot of people have this as a similar story, just in different iterations of it, which is message people, go have coffee with people, interact with them, and they're kind enough to help. The ones that are kind enough to help will then help you go in that direction. And I think one big theme, which I think comes through a lot in your podcast as well, is the importance of networking and having a network and mentors and people around you. And I guess Will was that person for you because it opened a door, and you guys still work together now. So it clearly, it was an important connection. But
100%.
I think especially as it relates to your podcast now and like your ambitions in the future, I think let's spend a little bit of time talking about the importance of networks and the importance of, I call it kind of your tribe, and how does that shape you? How has that influenced you in your career, but also in the decisions that you've been making?
Yeah, I guess I think that one thing that I've developed as I've got older is this idea that you are the average of the 5 people around you. And I've definitely over the years surrounded myself with some people that I think are very beneficial to my progress. And for example, yesterday I met up with my best friend Tom, and we were just talking about like the next steps for both of us, because we've both got to challenging points in our careers in times, and how better to navigate that than with the people that you really trust. So and you're another one of those people as well. Like we do it every day, but sometimes you sort of like I said, it's these 5 people around you. But I don't know if that's really answering the question. That's got a bit deeper, I think. But networks in general are just everything, and it could be even going back to those days at that company called Transact, where I made friends with people, and later on, 10 years in some cases, with Liam, for example, I've not seen him for 10 years, but we were friends. He went off in a different direction. I went off in a different direction. But then we've come back, we've met again for the podcast. And I think that you never know where those connections will take you. And I think that just leaving a good lasting impression on people fundamentally has to be like your number one objective, because they could open doors for you in the future. Networks are everything. Rich, who was on the podcast recently, spoke about a guy that we both met in Japan. I was essentially pitching wealth management services because this guy owned his own company, and Rich was talking about his gin. We both got this guy interested, and actually Rich followed up And I didn't follow up. I was quite young and I think inexperienced at this point. I was maybe, a bit nervous because I wasn't fully qualified as an investment manager. So I didn't really know like what I was doing. And it was probably a big regret from me as well. Like that was somebody that entered my network who could be potentially a client and I did nothing with.
Yeah, I think so. I spend a lot of time with you and I, go out to get coffee with you and I'm privy to your extraordinary superpower, which is to get into the deepest of conversation over the 2 minutes that it takes to order and pay for a coffee, which is extraordinary. And I think that is your superpower. And I think that's what's led you to want to do this podcast, not to put words in your mouth, but that's definitely in your networking sphere, the entry point, the foot in the door, you are excellent at. How does that how do you get into these conversations?
I don't really, how do I get into these conversations? I'm genuinely interested in what people have to say.
You're curious.
I'm very curious. And I think, again, I had lunch and went out for a few drinks with Tom yesterday and we were talking about the podcast, how it's evolving. And he said, like, I remember saying to you when I first met you, you're one of the most curious people I've ever met. And you're genuinely curious. You're not like, you're just asking.
You're not faking it.
I'm not faking it at all. Like, this is asking questions, particularly about what they do. I've always done. And like it'll be the owner of a coffee shop. It'll be somebody who I meet at a barbecue. It'll be you when I met you. And
anyone sat next to you on a train. Much to my annoyance. Because people that know us both know that is the polar opposite of who I am. But I think that's your superpower. That's why you're doing this. You're an excellent conversationalist. Someone, not me, described you once like that to me. And that's spot on. And I think that's why you're so good at what you're doing and getting people on board. And I think that's why people feel comfortable coming on and talking to you and sharing their stories. But if you were to describe it, and I think you mentioned it, what do you need to improve on?
Is that a question? What do I need to improve on? The follow-up is absolutely something which is my Achilles heel. I am unbelievable. That's very big-headed, but I'm very, very good at opening connections, meeting new people, and like befriending them in a very disarming way. And it's then my responsibility afterwards to follow up and make something happen with that. And I guess that is the area in my life where if I could match those two things together, I've got a formidable partnership. But I'm a very good networker. I'm happy to talk to anybody, open those doors and get us into quite intimate conversations with people very quickly. But I let myself down at the follow-up. Like I said, I go back to that guy in Japan, and that's one of my biggest regrets, is never following up with him. And I need to make sure that with this podcast I do better at that. And it's something which I'm really struggling to balance, I think, at the moment. And it's, I feel like I'm being pulled in different directions. I know that is an area, a weakness of mine, but maybe I need to overcompensate and to just do it.
Outsource it.
Exactly. I've always said, and I'll be very open about this, that I've always known that this level of follow-up is not my skill set. I would love to have a PA. I think a PA would be the biggest value add that I can have in my life.
It's hard, right? Because you're the face of it. You are the person that's created that deep connection. So it's very, very difficult to then pass that on to someone, to a stranger. So I think you need to find a little bit of an in-between where you're still able to be somewhat there and present in the follow-up moment of it, but then potentially like the scheduling element, then you outsource to someone else, because that's probably your biggest hurdle to really turbocharging and being super successful. But that's I think everybody is like that, right? Like that's why in business, a lot of the time businesses are formed with two people, somebody that's got the idea and is the big picture thinker, and somebody that gets shit done fundamentally. And that's why two things work really well together. So
yeah, that definitely, I feel like I would be best placed in like a partnership if I had a business, which I would love to have, and I always speak about these ideas that I have. But again, I think that the real difference between like an absolute top level entrepreneur and everybody else who has ideas is the action.
Yeah.
And I think that is the one area in my life that has so far let me down. But equally though, with this podcast, I am now learning to do those things. I am now following up with people. I am now booking guests in. And look, if this ever got to the position where it started to generate money and it was like a proper brand, then I'm sure that you could outsource that quite easily. You meet somebody, you have a really good conversation, and you can say, look, I would like to follow up on this, would love you to be a guest, but my so-and-so will be in charge, will be in touch, like my producer or something. But that is pie in the sky. That is like so far away from where I am today.
Do you think so? Do you think that's very far away? As in, do you think that's where the podcast is going? It becomes a source of because I've always seen it as something that you do for fun, which is your passion. Do you see this as becoming a revenue stream or the main source of employment for you, I guess?
I would like it to at least be self-sufficient. I would like it to at least make money where I can outsource the editing, where I can outsource some very minor parts that take up a lot of my time. This is one of the most enjoyable but time-consuming things it is the most enjoyable but the most time-consuming thing I've ever done. So if I could take away some of those stresses, I guess, by paying for it, I would love to do that. At the moment, it would mean that I do it completely out of my own pocket.
Yeah.
I heard a podcast, and I'm going to credit this guy very, very quickly. Dodge Woodall was somebody that, again, sort of like met once. We were at the Rugby World Cup. He was at the same table as us. He was a guest of the person that invited us, and got a chatting to him. What do you do? I'm a podcaster. Interesting. I've always wanted to do a podcast. And I think he was a person that really gave me the inspiration that I can actually do this, because I was in touching distance at the moment with somebody that was a podcaster. At the time I met him, he had 186 episodes, and I remember walking away and saying, this guy's got 186 episodes. Like, that's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
I think I can do that too. And that's why I sort of like invested straight away in like making sure I've got good production, making sure I've got a good thumbnail. I didn't see this as something that is just going to be a hobby. I saw this as something that I can get 186 episodes too. I've never put a number on it, but I knew that if that guy that I'm chatting to there can do it, I can do it too. But I've listened to a load of his podcasts now. I really enjoy them. But he did one where he spoke about starting the podcast with his producer, and he said that you need about £30,000 to have a professional podcast.
Wow.
A studio, video production, a producer, the editing, the booking of the guests. Like, he's got full-time staff now that does this for him. I don't have £30,000 that I can invest into this.
Yeah.
So hence why I'm taking on a lot of the responsibility myself. I'm editing myself. I'm recording myself. I'm booking the guests myself. And that's all part of the process. Like, it's essentially a startup.
Yeah.
I'm running this as a very lean startup. But it's a hobby. It doesn't make any money. A lot of startups don't, I guess. But I would love to be able to outsource. But to answer your initial question, do I see this as making money? I don't see it as anything other than if successful podcasts make money, this is going to be a successful podcast. I set out from day one to make sure that it looked good and it sounded good, and that the content was good.
Yeah.
And maybe that goes back into the ambitious minds thing from the start. If you're going to do something, do it properly.
Yeah. I think that's something that I credit you with a lot. I've sat there across the table from you, listening to you say that you wanted to start a podcast for the longest of times, or just any business for that matter. Yeah. Every week you want to start a new business, whether it's a coffee shop or At one point, we were potentially importing, I don't even remember what that you saw in Southeast Asia, and you were like, this sounds great, let's import it, or something crazy like that.
Oh, yeah, those were cushions from Thailand.
Yeah.
Those little Thai cushions that you can like lean back on and recline on and read a book. They don't sold here, and genuinely, I think there's an opportunity. Yeah.
You see opportunity and you want to go for it.
Yeah.
What stops you from realizing them, or why is this podcast different? Why did this actually happen?
I mean, like, do you want me to? I think I've told everyone already that it was you. And then going back to this partnership, let's talk about Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. You have the ideas, you have the brains, then you also have a very clever person who is essentially the driving force, going out there and selling it, starting the business. And there aren't many people out there like Elon Musk who have the entrepreneurial, the ability to do, and also the ability to create ideas. Those people, I think, are very rare. So sometimes you need a partner, and you were my partner. You were the person that came along. You were the doer. You were the person who can crack through the tasks. And it was literally as simple as, why have you not started this? I don't know how to start it. Okay, well, I'm going to go on Google right now, and I'm going to find a podcast studio, and I'm going to book it for 2 weeks' time. And that was literally it. The barriers to entry for starting a podcast are low. And I mean, I don't know if many people know this story, but your podcast wasn't the first attempt. We actually...
No, it was the third, actually.
The first attempt was when we booked the studio. And if I described it as like turning up to a porn set, that would probably be the most accurate description for it. And there was somebody else listening into our conversation.
Not that either of us have ever been to a porn set,
no,
just
I'm
as
not,
a disclaimer.
If I imagined what it would look like, I think it would look like a porn set. There were cameras in there. There was like a green screen in the background. There was like it was just so forced, and it was so...
sterile.
It was, yeah. And it was so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why this podcast so far has been successful is because the guests feel very comfortable.
Yeah. I think we started it and we were there, and both of us were looking at each other nervously and saying, oh, well, let's give this a go. Not sure how it's going to turn out. Both of us were quite nervous. It felt a little bit awkward. Somebody was in the room listening to us, and we were like, oh, not sure about someone. I mean, obviously people will listen, but you don't want somebody in the room listening.
Yeah. Not for your first go, at least.
No, exactly. But then we came home, and the thing that I found reassuring is that didn't deter you. If anything, you were like, I actually loved it. I want to book my own equipment, buy it, and do it at home.
I felt really energized.
And that's what we did, didn't we? You basically went on Amazon, ordered some microphones, and then on the weekend we went out, had a bottle of wine, and then came back and recorded it.
And
I guess that's a lesson, though, right? For starting a business.
Oh, that is literally the lesson.
Just do it.
And I remember, just do it. The podcast probably should have been called Just Do It, but then we wouldn't have had to get any guests on. It would just be just fucking do it.
Yeah, also heavily copyrighted by someone else.
Exactly. But there is also another thing in there I want to talk about, because, I remember I came away from that energized. It didn't deter me. It actually inspired me. It's like, okay, right, I think that we could do this, but I don't want to do it in that setting. So I came away and bought the equipment, and the equipment I think in total cost £200 for everything. The microphones, but I did the research. I came away and I did a lot of research. And fundamentally what I tried to do was create a very, very good quality sounding audio. And I didn't have a lot of money to spend on this. I just said, I'll spend, I think it was like £35 per microphone and this little box that links them both up together that you plug into your Mac. And that was it. And then at that point, you've got good quality audio that you've done your research on, and you know it will sound good. And then fundamentally, it's all about the conversation. And I think that I could do the conversation part. And then we literally just brought it in-house, recorded it literally from our kitchen island. And now we've developed it. We've actually got what I think is a really cool looking studio that's in our front room. you're sat on the sofa right now. I'm sat on like a little, what would you call it, an armchair. And we've got the microphones on arms now, and we've sort of built it out, but it looks professional and it sounds professional. And I said from day one, I did my research and I tried to get good quality audio and production for as essentially little cost as I physically could. And I managed to achieve that.
It goes back to your first point where you're like, if you're going to do something, do it well and make it look professional, because you've got one shot at it. And when you go out and you try and book other guests, if you've got something that looks really smart, sounds really smart, it almost validates it and makes it look even maybe more professional than what the reality of it is.
Yeah, and actually there is something I've just been thinking about as you said that, and that it is first impressions, in my opinion, are so important.
So important.
First impressions, the thumbnail. I think I spent a month employing somebody to do that thumbnail, and there were multiple iterations until we got to the finished product. And the finished product I was so happy with, but it looked really professional. First impressions. Then episode 1 had to sound good.
Yeah, product needs to be really good.
It had to sound good, and that was the first impression, because if I'm going to keep listeners, they're not going to come if the audio is distant and blurry or whatever it will be. It had to sound really good. And that's one thing I've not compromised on. First impressions are fundamentally important. And now, as I've been reaching out to guests a lot more high profile, but people I've never met before, I got a website. And the website, and I didn't do that until I had a website and until I had my own email address, because I didn't want to email them from my personal email address.
From your Gmail account.
I wanted it to be from j@ambitiousmindspodcast.com, my Ambitious Minds podcast website. And I link that in there. And I say, like, this is who I am. This is why I'm contacting you. I'd love you to be a guest. And this is the link to my website if you want to check out more. And they go on there and they will know this looks professional. This is not a budget podcast I'm going on to. It is a budget podcast, but it doesn't look like a budget podcast.
So can I ask, what next? Where do we go from here? I know we just said, you want it to wash its face. You want it to be able to make some money so that you can keep going. Is the podcast the destination of what you want to be doing? Do you want it to spin off into something more? What does the podcast represent to you? Do you want to keep working in wealth management and podcasts on the side? How do the two relate with each other? Because they feel quite different, right? They feel like they're two very different things, but do you in your head see them as complementary to one another?
Absolutely. And I guess it was the wealth management, it was my job that really inspired me in the first instance to choose this theme, and particularly focus on those sort of unknown entrepreneurs and trying to get those people on the show. Because in the UK, there are loads of businesses out there, but half of them, you don't know what they do. Like, the big names, the ones that are listed on the stock market, the ones that are on the high street, but there are so many people out there that have family run businesses, and those are fundamentally my clients. So I don't go to a investment meeting. I don't go to a client meeting and only discuss the portfolio. And I've realized I've always done this. I go there and I talk about that, and I ask them questions about them and their businesses and how do they get there. And essentially, I think that this podcast could go hand in hand with my job. It complements it very well, because maybe some of my clients might one day be guests. Who knows? I would love that to happen, and I've now been telling more people about it in work, and it's something which I was really nervous at first about doing, because I didn't want them to feel like I was distracted from doing it. And I framed it as I'm on the side. I have a hobby. And they listened to some episodes. One of them listened to yours and was like, "Oh my God, this woman's amazing! Like, it's when can we meet her?" and it's actually, I think, built credibility.
Your own personal brand.
My own personal brand, and now it's also opening the doors to network with people that I've never met before, and that might be potential clients in the future. Because I think that I can help people in multiple ways, whether it be from the tax planning, whether it be giving them some advice about how they start their first ever investments, or whether it could be somebody sold a business and they want to invest that money. And
so really what you're saying is it both feeds itself. It's almost it's a circle, because you have clients that have gotten wealthy by non-linear trajectories and are very ambitious and have started companies and have made money doing really interesting, diverse things. So it's sparked your curiosity about how many other people are out there with these stories. And, we all hear exactly what you described at the very beginning, the lawyers, the doctors, the accountants, and the engineers. But actually, there's so many more careers. There's so many more ways to have, to make money, to have a career, to have objectives, to have ambitions. You meet them through work, and this is your way of telling their stories, but also through ambitious minds, you might meet new clients.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that's the key thing. That it's not the reason why I'm doing this at all. I'm doing it because I'm interested in these people's conversations. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I've listened to podcasts, I think, for 10 years, and I've always been one of these people that has tried to go down the personal development, the self-help, I guess, aspect of my life, and always trying to improve. And I've done a lot of that from reading books or listening to podcasts. And I used to be reading books, and more so over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been listening to podcasts. And I just felt that I can contribute something to this as well. There's this ecosystem that I've benefited from massively. Do I feel like I could help other people with this? And my key goal from this is not actually monetary. I don't really know how big it will get, but I get little wins all the time, and those little wins are, if I can inspire somebody to start a business or change career or get the confidence to take the next step. I got a text message the other day from one of my guests' dad saying, I've just listened to the podcast and I wanted to send you a message specifically to say thank you for selecting my son. And that made my day. That was like, what a moment. I'm able to, I don't know, like, make other people, like, raise their profiles, make other people proud. And that guest was then sending me screenshots of all these messages that they had been receiving, saying like, I listened to your podcast, it was so good, you came across so well. That there is a dopamine hit in itself. So there are so many different ways that this is, I think, making this whole experience really enjoyable. And I'm just riding the wave of that right now. I'm just enjoying it. And I don't want that fun to stop. And I don't think it will stop, because the guests that I have coming on, because I'm curious, I've been doing this for free. I've been doing this outside of a microphone for the past, 10 to 15 years of my life. And now the only difference is that I'm sat down in a more formal setting with a microphone.
You're recording it.
And we're recording it now.
Yeah, these are the conversations you and I have all the time, or us and our friends. You kind of answered my question, but I want to ask you anyway. What's important to you when it comes to your career, or when it comes to you as a person? I think we used to speak about this a lot, and it's probably changed a little bit for me, maybe, but not so much for you. I think people, when they go into a job, think about either money, status/power, as in, the ranking that you have in an organization, or whether people know your name, or balance. So having something that feeds your lifestyle and your addiction, not your addiction, sorry. Or balance, having something that feeds your lifestyle, but you are not addicted to, you are not, enslaved to the job. So there's really, make as much money as possible, or be as popular and well known as possible, or enjoy life and have a job. What is it for you?
I think I worked out, I worked really, really hard. When I got this job working in finance, I worked incredibly hard, and I killed myself for, I think, the first 5 years. And I got myself to a position where I'd flown through my qualifications. I'd made a really good impression within the business that I was working for, and I was being paid well, and I was progressing. And then I was building up my clients, and I was realizing that what really mattered to me was like a work-life balance. And but I don't want to be enslaved to the job. That's the reason why I didn't want to be a lawyer, I think. When I really break it down, the reason why I didn't want to do that is because I saw people that were enslaved to that career, and they had the money that was luring them in. And I think I've always been somebody I like to have options, and I think that the podcast is really feeding into that. That like, if what I'm doing today, if I stop getting fulfillment from it, I can do something different. You
can stop.
Yeah, and I think that's fundamentally, so important for anyone that's have something on the side which is giving you some fulfillment and some satisfaction. Because otherwise it becomes all consuming. And I got to a point when I was about 28 and I was loving what I was doing and I was thinking about the next step, but I didn't really know where it was going. And I think I actually sort of like realized at that point that I started to understand what I really value. And at that point, I was like, I think I value being able to go to work and enjoy it. And the money didn't really matter as much at that point. It was just about, I like to take regular breaks. I like to go on holiday. I like to see the world. I like to speak to people, and finding a way that those could all sort of fit together.
Where do you need to get to, I guess, to feel like you've made it? What achievement, what arbitrary point of view is it, having a job that pays the bills so that you can go on holiday as you've just described? Or is there something you're chasing? Because arguably doing what you do without the podcast achieves that objective, right? But you've started the podcast, so there's clearly something you're looking for.
Yeah, well, you know me better than anybody. You know me, and I can't sit still. I never have been able to sit still. I never have been able to rest. My head is crazy. Like, if people ever looked at me and thought this guy has got it all figured out and it's like, got his shit together, it couldn't be any further from the truth. My head has got ideas flowing around it all the time. Weirdly, I can sleep quite well, which I think for the sort of like the way that my brain is so energized and like always thinking about things, I find that a bit of a mystery to myself. But I'm always thinking about like the next step, what else I can be doing. In my opinion, there are not enough hours in my life to be able to do the things that I want to do. So I actually want, one of my key objectives is to try and live as long as possible. Hence why I go down like these sort of personal development for health and nutrition and all these sorts of things, because I just feel like I just want to be doing stuff.
You just want to be doing more.
I want to be doing more all the time.
So you're never content. You will never achieve
I feel like
nirvana because you are always chasing for more.
I'm always chasing more, and I'm always thinking about new ideas. And like, I sit down with guests and I sit down with friends and like, we are talking, and then all of a sudden, bang, like there's an idea about a business that can be started. And I just like, that has always been the case and it has never gone away, and I don't ever want it to go away, but I don't think it will ever go away. So I don't know what I want to get to like feel fulfilled, to feel like I've done it. I've succeeded. What does success look like? I have no idea. Where do I want to get to? Again, I have absolutely no clue. All I know is that every week I've got something new that I want to do. And it actually, I guess that is a bad thing, because it also feels like I can never like stop and reflect and enjoy where I am, where I've got to, what I'm doing. I'm always just wanting more. Maybe
you have to self-impose the moments of reflection. Like this could be one of them, for example.
You mean right now?
If you look back, if you look back at what you've achieved in this calendar year, so we are in June now.
Yeah.
You started a podcast. This is your 20th episode. You've learned how to record, video edit, audio edit, do shorts and reels on Instagram. You've literally had to
I've been learning
manufacture an entire podcast production agency into yourself. That's a big achievement. And on top of that, you've reached out to guests, you've made people come on, you've made them feel comfortable, you've told their stories, you made them feel happy. Like, I think it's important in life for all of us. I think this is a bit of a, I don't want to go into the stereotyping of, millennials, Gen Z, boomers, and how everyone is different. I think in society right now, all of us, no matter when you were born, are constantly chasing something because there is so much out there. The world is so big and it's never been as interconnected as it is now. So there is always constantly more that you could be doing, more opportunity, opportunity to create things and money and, jobs and careers are endless, and so are the distractions. And so it's very difficult to sit and be like, oh wow, I've done that. So I think actually that's a lesson, I would say, for myself, but for a lot of people, to stop sometimes and self-impose a reflection break to say, wow, I've done all of that, congrats me. Because I read something, I've been really, really stressed this year around my next step and where I'm going and what I'm doing. And then I read something that said, if you told your 10-year-old self what you were doing right now, they would be so proud of you.
I completely agree. And I think that I only have to probably chat to my parents, and they are so proud of me, I think, and both my brothers, for what we've done and what we've achieved. I think setting out as a young, teenager from a working class family that had just I think I wanted to create a life for a potential family that I had that was different to what I had, and give them as much opportunity as physically possible. And I'd go back to that version of me, and they would look up to me, I think.
Matthew McConaughey, when he accepted, I think it was an Oscar, said, there is someone that I look up to, and it's me in 10 years time. And I never reach him. I'm always 10 years behind him.
Yeah.
But he's my hero and my role model, and that's who I look after.
I think that, and Chris Williamson, another sort of very inspirational podcaster that I've been listening to over the last 5 years or so, said, do something today that tomorrow's version of you will be happy about, be proud of. And I guess it goes back into that, always do something that is moving you forward. And, it's fundamentally do stuff today that you will look back on with pride, not regret.
It can even be simple things like going to bed early, or exercising, or eating well. It doesn't always have to be these big grandiose things. And I think that's the other thing, is the ability to celebrate little wins as if they are big wins, because sometimes you don't realize it, but it's a major thing, right?
You said something a moment ago which I just want to touch on. You use the word distractions. Now, you know me, and I'm distracted all the time. We sit there and have a conversation, and it's like my mind is going, and it is like my mind is racing. I think that, how do I know that what I'm doing now, the podcasting, is for me? It's that when we have this conversation right now, my brain is nowhere else.
You're fully in the moment.
I am fully in the moment. And I can't think of any other time in my life when I'm like that.
Why do you think that is?
I think that it is because it's mine. And one, I enjoy these, again, going back to that, I enjoy these conversations. There is that part of it. And the other part of it is that this is my project. This is so different to work. I love the job that I do, but my job will never give me the same level of satisfaction and fulfillment that this is.
Well, it's not got your face on it. And this has.
It doesn't have my face on it, no. That's an interesting point as well, because...
Sorry, finish your story. I interrupted you. So the first thing is you really enjoy it. The second thing is that it's yours.
Fundamentally, yeah. Because it is mine. And I think that work will never... The job that I do will just never be able to fulfill me in the same way, because I guess I chose this as opposed to... somebody else chooses you when you go into a career. But I have my face on it. I have a reputation to uphold, but that isn't really the reason why I'm so in the moment with this. It's because I'm just really, really enjoying having those conversations. And for that 1 hour and a half or however long it takes, all I can think about is that conversation I'm having with that person. And I would say as well that, just as a slight, this is something I've noticed, is that when I do this in person, the connection that you build with the person is so much deeper. When you do it over a video call, it doesn't feel like you have the same level of engagement into it. That's something that, you know, I have to reflect on as well, and say, like, can I do all these in person if possible? And I know that it's not achievable, but when I'm doing it in person, like, all I can think about and all I can focus on is like being two of us in this chair and being really present. I
mean, it's strange to have an uninterrupted, by your phone, by other people, by situations, 1 hour long conversation staring deeply in someone's eyes. That doesn't really happen anymore. So
no,
like, it is quite an intimate, you do get to know each other quite well. You enter into this like very comfortable stage to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Give me 3 top lessons that you've learned whilst starting Ambitious Minds.
Lessons I've learnt. I think that the key lesson is, if you're thinking about doing something, it probably is nowhere near as difficult to start as you believe it is. And that's a lesson that if I could go back to myself 5 years ago, I would tell them, with all the business ideas that I've had, that you just have to do it. Like, and we did that with the podcast, and it has been enjoyable. We go back to what I said a moment ago, which was, this is something that I find so much fulfillment from, and because it's mine. And no one can ever take that away. That's the amazing thing as well. Like, you are in full control, and no one can take that away from you. Just do it. I think the barriers to entry are probably lower than you expect. The first hurdle is always the hardest one. A second thing is, I think, be true to yourself as well. Every podcast that I've done so far, I've tried not to adapt to maybe like what I think the listeners would want to know. I've just been me, and again, that's the only thing that you can ever be. So I would just say, like, do something that is true to you. Don't do it to try to impress other people. And I've learned a lesson from this, and this will be the third thing. It would be, I've learned that I have weaknesses that I need to figure out how to overcome now. And one of those weaknesses is I have lost all work-life balance, all of it. I work and I podcast, and there's no balance. I don't do anything else.
Yeah.
I think, neglected the amount of time I've spent with you. I've barely been to the gym in the last 4 months since starting this. So I think that it's a key takeaway for me. And, you know, again, I think that going back to sort of like that personal development side of me is, I now have some things to work on. If I'm going to improve on what I'm doing, I have to have that level of introspection that this isn't what the current situation is not sustainable, and I have to figure out a way to make it better.
But I suspect that's something that a lot of people resonate with, not just people that are also doing side hustles, but say you're a first-time parent, or not even a first time, you're a parent, and you're also working full-time. That's a difficult thing to balance. You have mom or dad guilt if you're away from the kids, or if you are in general just trying to have a social life, go to the gym and have a really demanding job. Work-life balance is difficult. It's not just difficult for you, but it's really, really healthy, I think, to stop and be like, I am spinning a lot of plates and I have not got this under control. Rather than burn myself into the ground trying to control it, what do I need to pivot and change to be able to do that? Because maybe the answer to that is actually outsourcing, or dropping something that you don't enjoy. Now, I'm not saying dropping your podcast, but with other people, it's like, for me, it's been look, the amount of travel that I used to do from a personal perspective has dropped over the last 2 years because there's just no time. There's no time, and it was exhausting. I love traveling and I love seeing new places, but I was almost doing it to maintain this level in my head of this jet setter mentality of like, I'm getting on a plane every weekend and I'm doing here and I'm great. I'm not tired. It's fantastic. I'm having, breakfast in Paris and then I'm having dinner in London, and that's a fabulous lifestyle. But it was running me into the ground. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't exercising well. That had to be reduced. I feel better now, but my life feels like it's shrunk. And so it's a moment where you're like, oh, what's the priority? What's important? So I think the next step to realizing that is a shortcoming is like, how do I shortlist the solutions?
Yeah. And one thing, I've realized this today because I did have a couple of drinks yesterday. Whilst that is really important for your social life and those sorts of things, when, again, going back to what I said earlier about, I want this to be as professional as possible and I want this to be first impressions. If someone new is listening to it, you've got to be on your A game. And my God, like, you can't be on your A game if you're not sleeping well, if you're drinking or whatever. If you're waking up hungover and you've got a big conversation coming up, like, you are not going to perform anywhere near
You're not the best version of yourself.
No, not at all. And that was a bit of a moment yesterday where, or actually waking up today, where I was like, what the hell am I doing? And luckily I'm the guest today, so I can, I don't have to deliver to somebody else. But particularly now I'm reaching out to people that I've never met before. And like I said, some people that have quite big audiences. I need to make sure that I am on my A game. And I think I'm going to have to taper back some things in my life, like the amount of socializing I'm doing or the amount of drinking that I'm doing, which I think I was doing before anyway. But you get priorities and you have to make sure that, like, I'm all in on this now.
Yeah.
And how am I going to be, I guess it's like an elite athlete. Like, how do they prepare for going out on the football field?
Yeah.
How am I going to prepare for an interview coming up? They are different mediums, but you have to prepare.
The method's the same.
In similar ways, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really good example, because when we see an athlete, we understand that there's training behind where their output is. And so we acknowledge the hours of training that they must do and the sacrifices that they must make and how they must eat. But people don't treat careers in the same way. But CEOs have had to put just as many hours of training into things. They have to finesse the way they present. They have to really figure out what works in a networking and small talk situation. They have to be able to craft to have difficult conversations with people. It's practice. It's the same as training in a completely different environment, but people don't give people in business the same level of credit of, oh no, come on, come out, have a few drinks, it'll be fine. But actually, like, if I have a big presentation, I need to sleep the night before.
Of course.
And that's changed a lot for me in the last year. Whilst before I'm like, yeah, let's go out. Especially when I was traveling for work, you'd go out for dinner, you go out for drinks, and then the next day you'd feel terrible. And you've got this mammoth day in front of you, and you're like, I am the worst version of myself today. And I really struggled to get through it. So, like, it's interesting. I feel like as I age and I go into my career more and more, I realize actually preparation as a rounded 360 element for my body is really, really important to make sure that I can deliver. And that, I think, is a huge lesson that maybe we're all a bit more consciously aware of. I feel like I have more conversations now about people getting enough sleep and eating well and exercising and, like, is their mental health in check to be able to perform. And that certainly wasn't the case, I think, with our parents, or even when I started working. That wasn't even that long ago.
I think we've definitely entered this era now of everyone's trying to get the extra 1%. So, we're now more aware of sleeping and drinking and supplements and exercise and all these sorts of things. But I have so much respect for my parents bringing me up. Now I can see that they both had full-time jobs and they had 3 kids I don't have a kid. I'm struggling. Like, how the fuck did they do it?
Yeah.
And how did they make it work? And how did they manage to invest so much time into me and my brothers and have a full-time job? It blows my mind, and I have a lot of respect for, so much respect for anyone that is a business owner or successful in their career, and they also have children, because
they're all full-time jobs.
They're all full-time jobs, yeah. I'm doing a full-time job, and I joked to everyone that I've taken on a second full-time job with a podcast. Well, how would I fit in a third full-time job, which is being a dad? I have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've always been sort of like veering towards not wanting kids, because going back to what I said at the start about I have so many things in my life that I want to do, and how am I going to do them in addition to also having a family? That seems really, really hard and an overwhelming thing to think about.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think that that's interesting. We have this conversation a lot, but it's like the role that employers and employment, the 9-to-5 employers in the corporate job, is so anti having a family, because it's designed. I was thinking about this today as we were cycling randomly, but it's like school ends at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, but work doesn't end till 5. Why? Like, who created that schedule?
We literally call it the 9-to-5.
Right. So why doesn't school go 9 to 5? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And my parents, who were both full-time workers, all they did was they would fill my schedule with after school activities like swimming, like, sports related activities, to try and fill that gap. And that makes sense, because they didn't get off work until, well, they had their own business, so it wasn't 5, but it was more like 7 or 8 or 9. But it's the way that work is designed is not designed to also have kids. That's why I think the appeal of having your own business is you have to work a lot more, because a lot of more your skin is more in the game, but you do your own hours, you make your own hours. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about. And you know me, I'm not somebody that's super I'm a bit risk averse, and I don't want to start my own company, because that adds an element of financial stress that scares some people, including me. But the upside of it is like, but you can dictate your own life.
Yeah.
You have to work really, really hard, but you do it at your own mercy, right? And so I guess what's difficult for you with this podcast is you're in your own free time, you're doing this.
Yeah.
And this has to fit around your full-time job. And that's what's probably really stressful, is you can't in the middle of the day go like, oh, let me do 2 hours of editing because I have to work, so I can't do that until 5 o'clock.
Literally. And I do that until midnight.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead.
Yeah.
And then I compromise on my sleep.
Yeah.
So that's where I have to find a better balance. And I just respect parents so much, but you are right that the corporate world isn't really designed to be a parent at the same time. And I think we're now understanding that a bit more, because in the past, the man went to work. So like there's someone else at home looking after the family. They're taking that responsibility. But now both people are in work. So we're entering this new paradigm of, we need to think about how we balance these, and how this new world where both people are working in full-time jobs can balance a family. And I think that's why there's so much of an appeal now to start your own business.
Yeah.
Because it fundamentally provides you with the ability to manage your own diary.
So I'm going to ask you some questions that you normally ask at the end of your podcast, but I'm going to twist them a little bit and do them a bit differently from you.
Yeah.
So instead of asking what you would ask your 21-year-old self, what would you say to a 21-year-old now who's asking you for career advice?
I'm actually going to reframe the question slightly, and I'm going to say, what advice would you give somebody that is leaving school?
You just can't take the host out of you, can you?
I can't, no. Because I think this is really important, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about. We've now got to a position in life where we are encouraging people into higher education. And it feels like 30 years ago, your differentiator was having a degree. All of the people that are now top accountants and lawyers, etc., they all went to university and they got these jobs and they worked their way up. Now it feels like you have to have a degree and a master's and whatever else just to get yourself in the door.
And from the best university.
And from the best universities. And I think that there is so much pressure being added to students, young children, that you need to go to university or you need to do this. I felt very conscious about this, but I didn't do the uni thing. I didn't finish my higher education. But I made up for it with relevant qualifications.
And they hard work.
They were all that I needed. When I really found out afterwards that if you want to go and be an architect, there are certain routes you have to go down or whatever, or like a brain surgeon, I don't know, but
yeah, I'd like my brain surgeon to have gone to medical school.
Yeah, of course. But I think that be open-minded. One, be open-minded about starting a business young, because you have no responsibilities. You can give it a go. When you're 21 years old and you're living at home with your parents, businesses aren't as capital intensive as you think. If you've got a good idea, you might be able to make something work. Give it a go. Secondly, work out if there is an alternative route to get into the career that you want to try. Also, that's an important point. The career that you want to try, because you don't know you want to do it. Not many people can sit there and say, as a 15-year-old self, I know I want to do this, and it is actually the job that they want to do when they're 50 years old. Often you are figuring these things out as you're going along.
But the pressure of choosing what degree to do starts when you're 15 and you're choosing which classes you're going to do, which then lead you to the acceptance into the university that you think that you want to go to, and the degree that you think that you want to do for the career that you think that you want to do, but you've not tested this out at any point.
I wanted to be a lawyer. So what did I do when I went on from GCSEs? I was like, okay, well, what is going to get me into a good university or whatever? And I knew that to get to study law, I needed to do something like English literature and history and these sorts of things. But I chose history, like 17th and 18th century history, and it was the most boring thing I've ever done. And it wasn't. It was a mistake. I didn't enjoy it. It was a mistake for me. Didn't enjoy it. But again, like, it's who is driving this. This thing of, I want to be a lawyer, and allowing the legal side to dictate what you want to do, instead of saying, what do I enjoy? What do I want? What do I think I could be quite good at? And a lot of people talk about, follow your passions. But I think that actually try to fundamentally find what you're good at and then lean into that. And then if you want to go and explore, going into work as an accountant, there are different routes to being an accountant that doesn't require university. I know, because it's one route that I looked at one point. You can do your AAT, you can do your ACCA. You don't need a degree to do that in the first instance. You can train professionally without that. So there might be internships that are available. There might be apprenticeships. You might really enjoy it being an electrician, a plumber. Explore these different ideas, first of all, before you commit to going into university. Because what you get at the end of it, and it's something that I've never had, is a £40,000 balloon of debt hanging over my head that I'm paying off for the next 10, 20, 30 years of my life. I've never had that. And it's been the most liberating thing, because whenever we got bonuses from work, well, what happened? Student debt took that, took a third of it. Taxman takes some of it. And I go back to what I said at the start. I wanted to have the ability of having options and change career. Now, if that bonus that I got that allowed me to do that was a third of it was taken by a student loan repayment, well, then I don't have that option anymore. So I think go and figure out what you want to do, see if you enjoy it, and then maybe start to then specialize and start to work out, are there professional qualifications that I can do on this thing that I'm enjoying? And in my case, I did not need to go to university.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective, and I think it's an important one to have, and it's a really unpopular one to have, so people don't talk about it. I think if I told my parents, like, you know, I might not go to university, they might fall off their chair, because everything that they had designed for me was to go to uni, because that meant that I would have a great job, and then that meant that I would have a great life, and I would have a good salary, and I would be successful in life. And I did that. I went to uni, I have a bachelor and I have a master's. I don't think you need either of those two things for the job that I'm doing now.
What was your degree in?
No, my degree was in international relations, but that's because I wanted to do international law. So when I went into it, I thought I wanted to do that. And then I changed my mind, and I did a master's in sports management because I felt like I needed an academic bridge. The reality is I didn't. It did help me get my first job because it was relatively relevant experience to a certain degree, or whatever it is that they were looking for my first internship. So it did help me open the door.
Yeah.
So I guess it served its purpose from that perspective, but it didn't necessarily help me for the job that I'm doing today. But one thing that I will say in pro-university is, for those that haven't got a clue what they want to do, it gives you certain life skills. So for me, what I really value of my university experience is that I did it abroad. So for me, it taught me to leave the comforts of home, to have to learn how to budget, cook, do laundry, like clean my room, and be a functioning adult in society outside of my family nucleus, which had always really been very insular and very protective, right? And that was a really good lesson. And if it hadn't been for university, I don't know that I would have left Italy, because I don't know that my parents would have felt comfortable me just moving to London, or I don't know that I would have been that comfortable just being like, oh, let me just go to London and figure out, not having a clue what I want to do. So that created a pathway of almost like a second element of school, or like a protection that meant that I could test and learn if I wanted to go somewhere else and do it. So I think uni, if you take it as the purely academic form, I think we can argue with quite a lot of certainty that unless you're doing law, or you're doing engineering, or you're doing medicine that required hard degrees that exist nowadays are not necessarily like technical skill sets for jobs. They are great from an experience point of view, but so is something else. Like, so is trying out a first job.
Yeah.
So, which I never did, right? So like it's all about the path that you go through to learn the lessons that you need to learn in order to make you really successful for the future.
Yeah.
And for me, that was uni, because it got me abroad, and that has dictated my life. For you, it was actually trying to find ways around it and trialing the fact that you tried law, you didn't like it, so you pivoted and then you moved something else. But then you didn't feel like, shit, I did 4 to 5 to 6 years of law and I've now wasted it because I don't like being a lawyer.
Yeah.
And that would have been even harder to leave and
absolutely.
do something else. So it's all about experiences in the end.
And I would also say that as somebody that is leaving school today, or college or whatever today, at the age of 18, and they decide not to go into university, well, when it comes to, you're both 21, you've got 3 years of work experience, and you can talk about, the life experience of going to university. Well, what do you think that person who's been working for the last 3 years has got? They've got the ability.
Relevant experience.
They've got the ability to demonstrate when they sit in front of somebody that I'm a hard worker. That I've gone down the non-traditional route. I've taken a risk.
Well, the problem now is that now there is an expectation of going to uni and also working, because all entry-level jobs are like, relevant experience. And I'm like, but I've been at uni for 3 years. I have no relevant experience. The only experience I have is studying this. So now we've almost one-upped the expectations. And I really feel for people that are coming out of school now, because it's so stressful. It's like, you've got to have good grades, but you also have to have had a social life, because we don't want you if you're not like socially know how to handle yourself. Exactly. But you also have to have some sort of relevant experience, but you also have to have done some sports and some like charity work and like all of these things. And it's like, God, I'm 16. I'm already battling with like being a teenager and like everything that comes with that. The pressure is so intense.
Yeah. And also one thing that I did, which I don't know anybody that went to university that's done the same, I was 24 and bought my first home. I've been working for longer than everybody else.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm building up the funds.
That's crazy.
And I'm doing it whilst I'm working, whilst I'm living with my parents, right? So I'm working, living with my parents, and other people are, going and getting a degree, walking out with £40,000 worth of debt. I've got my own home. I've got equity.
Also debt.
Oh yeah, I've got a lot more debt. Yeah, I've got a lot more debt than that person, but I've got some equity. But I'm saving. I'm building up, and I'm
creating more opportunities.
I'm 6 years into this now.
Yeah.
You know, when you're 6 years in, you're in your late 20s.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, you know, people now, I don't buy my first home until I'm in my 30s. Well, of course you don't. You spent the first 3 years of your work life going to study.
I think this is a good way to sum up and to maybe end today is you are not one for the linear path. And that's something that I think you bring to me, to our friendship groups, to people in your life, is that, and I said this to you when I met you, and I probably will keep saying this to you forever, is like, the constant with you is that I never have a clue what's going to come out of your mouth, ever. You never take the linear path. Your brain doesn't work in the linear trajectory. And I mean that in the most flattering of ways. I do not mean that as an insult whatsoever. I think people see the path, and we are creatures of habits as humans. And all we want in life is to do what everyone else is doing and not be the outlier. You love and relish being the outlier and relish doing things in a way nobody else has thought about doing it. Your most used phrase when I say like, oh yeah, this is what everyone's doing, you're like, why? That makes no sense. And I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And you make me think about things sometimes grudgingly in a way that I don't want to think about it. And I think that will be the thing that will make you really, really successful in life, is that you look at problems almost with a blank sheet of paper and you come at it with a completely different solution. So I think you saying things like this about uni is not because you're being a contrarian about higher education, but it's because you genuinely think about a life hack to how do I get to the end destination in the most optimized way possible. Yeah. And uni today doesn't feel like the most optimized way possible for your career path, for example. Yeah. So I think that a lesson I've learned from you is look at things differently, and you will get a lot more opportunities than you think.
Yeah, and it also sort of ties into, I love the job that I do. I think I've been very lucky to finally find what I'm passionate about. But that comes down to opportunity cost. And every single time I'm making an investment decision, you have to look at it through the lens of opportunity cost. Could you better spend this money on investments in something else? Or if you're going to invest the next 3 years of your life in university, could I invest this time doing something else instead? So everything for me is always an opportunity cost.
Sometimes you take it to extremes, though.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, going back to sort of never feeling like I'm settled, and it's always looking at things of what else could I be doing with my time or doing. But I'm going to bring this all back, as we're going to finish soon, just to really conclude, I guess, what is the purpose of the podcast as well. The purpose of the podcast is to, I guess, demonstrate to people that you don't need to take the traditional route and do the things that everybody else is doing. I've had clients sat in front of me for the last 7 years that have really niche businesses in a lot of cases, and they have got a balance of their own business, they've got the money, they've got all these things that people look up to. And I want to showcase examples of this. And when I meet people and I get them onto the podcast, I want to demonstrate that there are so many different ways that you can do things. Liam, who came on the podcast, was working in finance, and it made him physically sick. He's now a barber. When he started, he went from earning X and he was earning significantly less. But he found he was happy, and he's now doing better than he was before. And you don't have to sit there and say, I want to be successful and I want to earn the money, and
there's only one way to go. Yeah, you can do all these things. There's so many different routes.
And my objective from this is to, I think, showcase as many examples as possible with such a diverse range of businesses or careers or ideas or ways that people have fundamentally feeling fulfilled or happy.
By the way, we've given lawyers such a hard time on this podcast, but
ironically, I want to speak to I want a lawyer to come onto this podcast. So
to defend themselves.
If you are a lawyer, this is reach out to me.
Call to action.
This is a call to action. Reach out to me. I do want to chat to a lawyer because, again, it is a career, and I want to hear from, I think there is always like survivorship bias as well. I didn't survive law. So I've got a very different perspective on it to somebody that has continued that career and they love it. Yeah. I'm sure there are corporate lawyers out there who love getting into the nitty-gritty of the contracts. It wasn't for me. Yeah. I'm sure there are criminal lawyers out there who absolutely love what they do. That sounds fascinating. But yeah, I'm interested in listening to them.
Find what works for you.
Yeah.
And work really, really hard at it.
Yeah.
And be successful.
And yeah.
Be curious.
And try to be successful and just have ambition.
Yeah, be ambitious.
Be ambitious and see where it takes you, but don't do things just because your parents tell you or somebody else.
Society does.
Society tells you, exactly. Explore what makes you happy. And hopefully I can give people examples of things that they've never really thought about, but they can listen to it and go, oh, that sounds interesting.
Let me look into that.
You're one, for example, you work in football. Someone might listen to it and go, oh, I would love to work in football. How did that person do it? Look at what you've done. Go on LinkedIn, look at what that person's done. What did they do to get to where they are? Reach out to them. Ask them. You literally ask them I did it.
Ask them for a coffee.
I asked that guy for a coffee. And that led me to where I am today. And don't be afraid to ask that question.
Yeah.
But what do you have to lose? They don't reply to you. Oh, well, move on to the next person who does that. See if they will reply. Somebody will. And I'm learning that again now. I reached out to somebody who was, for me, a great guest, and he responded in 15 minutes. Yeah, I'd love to come on your podcast. I'd be honoured, he said. And I was like, why are you honoured? But you never know what people will say.
You said something there that is really important, and I just want to touch on it really quickly, which is you reached out to someone that you didn't think would respond and said they would be honored to come on your podcast, and you're like, oh, why are you honored about coming on a podcast? Why is that? What do you need to happen? What validation do you need to feel like, okay, I've made it, I'm a podcaster now?
This is something that I have struggled with as well, a lot. I struggled with it when I first went to work for Investec, and everybody around me had been to university. And I shit you not, the first thing that somebody did when they came up to me was a guy with a double-barreled surname walked up to me and said, and so where did you read? And I'm like, what is this environment? And I felt like such an imposter at that point. And it took me years to finally feel like I fitted in, and I was working really hard, and I was actually accelerating at a faster rate than some of my peers who had been to the red brick universities. And I was like, oh, actually, I'm good at this, and I don't need the university degree, which I just felt. I used to lie to people about going to university. I lived for a moment of time in Canada, and I used to just palm it off and just be like, oh, I studied in Canada. But actually, it was like it was really my own insecurities that were. I gave so much weight to university being like the be all and end all, which I think is why I've got the perspective that I have now. I've come to a realization that it wasn't as important as I made it seem. But equally now I'm going through another phase of imposter syndrome with the podcast. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and I've got a podcast that day, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I've got a podcast today. 4 months ago, this thing didn't exist. And suddenly I'm now doing something that's completely different. And, who am I now? All of a sudden this didn't exist 4 months ago, and now I'm a podcaster. I'm now interviewing people for the first time. I've never spoken to them before. And I don't know what I need to do to feel comfortable, but I think that it's like the reps that I'm putting in now are making me believe. There was a moment with a guy called, he's not been aired yet, he will by the time this comes out, but there was a guy called Adam who was a guy I mentioned that I reached out to, and he said, I'd be honoured to come onto your podcast. And there was a question I asked in that interview that made him stop and think. And you could see that no one had asked him that question before. And that was when I looked at myself and literally went, wow, like, that was my question. I did that. And I think, just some like reinforcement to say,
validation.
Some validation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All of us seek validation in order to prove that where we are is where we're meant to be. But one thing that I would like to leave you with to reflect on is I actually think that your biggest superpower is the fact that you're not that you are an imposter, but that you are the person that does it differently, that you are the one that's outside. That's your superpower. The fact that you look at things differently, the fact that you come at it, you know, if somebody like that in that investic example where somebody asked you like, oh, where did you read? And you're like, oh, that made me feel out of place. Actually, I think that's your superpower, the fact that you are not like everybody else. And so I think the lesson in there for all of us is like, conformity is not the objective.
Yeah.
Success despite it should be the objective. Don't strive to fit in.
Yeah. And I think that...
strive to stand out and do a great job.
Yeah. And we're going to end on this because it's come full circle. I've listened to a lot of podcasts and I love them, and hence why I wanted to do this. But Chris Williamson on Modern Wisdom puts it in a very succinct way, and it says the average American is overweight, broke, and has less than $500 in their bank account. Striving to be like everybody else is a route to mediocrity. And I think fundamentally you have to do things differently if you don't want to be the average person who has a miserable life, who's overweight and has no money. You've got to do something different. You can't do what everyone else tells you to do.
Yeah. Great. And on that note.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being such an incredible host. Hopefully people don't demand you more.
Maybe I'll have a spin-off. Ambitious Wines. The After Hours edition. Exactly.
But look, I hope that people took something away from that. But yeah, that's me fundamentally. That's that's put me in the spotlight, and that's who I am and why I think the way that I do.
Well, thanks for telling us your story.
Thank you.